Madam Mayor, welcome to the show. You're growing as a human so rapidly.
If this was what my career was, would I feel like I had done enough? And the answer was no. Then the idea of mayor dropped into my head and then I couldn't unsee it.
Yeah, all of that has all been set up to be right here and to achieve this goal that we're trying to achieve.
I just got goosebumps.
Welcome to the Success Times Happiness podcast, a platform dedicated to engaging discussions with inspiring individuals aimed at nurturing personal development. I'm Richard Thompson, your host, a father, entrepreneur, world champion Ultraman, and passionate about all things high performance. Our mission is to empower both ourselves and you to unlocking our fullest potential, recognizing that this life is no dress rehearsal. While I may not have all the answers, this show serves as our collective journey to uncover them. Today's episode is with the new mayor of the Sunshine Coast, Rosanna Natoli. After a number of decades in journalism and teaching at the USC, Rosanna decided to run for mayor, endured a campaign for months, and ultimately, she was victorious in her quest. She is a devoted mother, wife, and passionate about women in business. In the episode, expect to learn what a day in the life of the mayor looks like, how she makes hard decisions, dealing with opposing opinions, and what her goals are as mayor. This was Rosanna's first podcast interview since taking the top job. And we're so proud and grateful for her to choose us. We talked about her life past, present, and future, and we hope you really love it. Let's get into it. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Now, walk me through from wake up to bedtime what a normal day looks like for the mayor on the Sunshine Coast.
Well, a normal day has certainly changed for me. It starts with the alarm going off at about 5:30, and then I snooze at least once. I give myself one snooze, but maybe twice, depending. Then I get up and get ready to go for a walk. So every morning starts with a walk. That's 7 days a week. I have a cavoodle who is sitting waiting for that walk as well. So we get out and we do that. These days I get to see the sunrise at that time, or otherwise I get to see that early morning light. I will have checked the phone beforehand just to make sure there's nothing that I need to know before I start to head out, then come back, get ready to go to the office, which these days includes doing my hair and makeup, whereas before I used to do that as part of my work. So that's a change. So I do that and then get out the door and head into the offices in Maroochydore. Mostly I start there. A lot of mornings, though, I might have a breakfast where I'm speaking or attending or those sorts of things. So I'd have that a couple of mornings a week. And that's also a couple of evenings as well. I try not to do a breakfast and an evening event on the same day. And I try not to do an evening event followed by a breakfast the same day, just to make sure that, I can actually be functioning at both of those. So then into the offices there. And then it either will be a workshop and meeting, so that's where I'm with the other 10 councillors in my team, the colleagues that are on the Sunshine Coast Council, and also our ELT, so our executives, the CEO, all of those, if we're looking at workshops or decision making, or it might be an ordinary meeting. So those sorts of things will take up a lot of hours in the day. And other days than that are meeting with people. It might be residents who have issues. It might be different groups that are representing sectors in our industry, in our community. It might be, I've spent quite a few days meeting with other mayors of Southeast Queensland and also the state. So going to things with the Local Government Association of Queensland or the Southeast Queensland Council of Mayors. So that kind of activity where I can advocate for our region, but also it's about networking and meeting other people, other decision makers, and seeing what works in other regions. What can I learn that I can bring back to our community? Those sorts of things. And then a couple of nights a week, I am going out to community groups and to different organisations and meeting people there.
Wow. And then usually getting your head on the pillow before midnight?
No.
No?
No, not normally before midnight. I am a late person anyway, so I am a night owl. And I try. We try before midnight, but no one in the family is in bed before 11. Not any of my children, none of them, none of us. None of us are usually up very early either. I'm the earliest.
Okay, fair play. Bundaberg born to Italian parents who immigrated. What was childhood like? And you're obviously, the second part of that is that you're obviously such a strong female. What did mum bring to the table that you got from her to give you that strength?
I'll start with the first part, what was childhood like. So born in Bundaberg but then moved to Brisbane and grew up in Brisbane. I have an older sister and a younger brother. You know, we were teased mercilessly for being Italian. We were called wogs at a time when that was not cool. It was not what anybody wanted to be. We so strongly wanted to assimilate into Australian society. And, you know, we were teased for what we had in our lunch boxes, or that our parents had accents, or whatever it was that might have been different. So we worked really hard to try not to be different and to assimilate. When I say in my lunchbox, I used to have chocolate on bread. So before Nutella, it would be actual slices of, you know, Cadbury chocolate in the bread, and the kids would be no doubt jealous.
Yeah, right.
But
comes
still.
Comes from a place of jealousy,
but
sure.
Still they'd be like, ew, what's on your lunch? You know, that sort of thing is when I have my chocolate sandwiches. Anyway, or, you know, let alone if you had an anchovy sandwich, that was just the end of the world. So we'd, try to move on to peanut butter, which was my staple throughout school, I think. So there was that side of it. There was as well, my parents came to Australia for a better life. My father really wanted to continue at school and wasn't allowed to, so he had to drop out to work the farm, and then decided to come to Australia because he wanted more for his children. And so tertiary education, they just wanted us to go to university. That was really important all the way along. And obviously that played on me because I worked really hard at school. I was the straight 7 students, the 990 TE score, the school captain, the ducks of the school. That's what I was really striving for, to make them proud.
To impress them.
And because I wanted it, I like to be number one.
Yeah.
You know, and I guess now that I look back, what do you know? All the way through my life, that's what I wanted to be, right? I wanted to be
it's a pursuit of like
excellence.
Excellence,
Yeah, the pursuit of excellence, of being the best that I could be. When I was at school, I wanted to get that 990 TE score and the straight 7s because I wanted to be able to make my own choice. I didn't want someone to say, oh, you can't do that university degree, or you can't do that because you didn't get a high enough mark. I wanted to be able to say, I've done it, I can choose. And then I didn't want to do medicine because I don't like blood. And I would faint. And so suddenly—
But to your point, the option was available.
The option was available to me. And everyone said, you're wasting your life, you're not doing medicine, you're wasting your life. So at least now I feel like I haven't wasted my life. I felt that along the way as well, but not just now. Everything is for a reason when it comes along the way. And I started in a Bachelor of Arts, much to everyone's despair. Oh, you're wasting your life. And then I swapped into a Bachelor of Science. And then after that, I went back and did a graduate diploma in journalism when I had been overseas twice and travelled and went, you know what, I still want to do this TV thing. So then I went back again. And education's never wasted. The first degree always is setting you up. Every time you are learning something, it is going to stand you in good stead somewhere down the track. Yeah. I really believe any time you get any education, whatever it is making you a better person.
Yeah.
So that's the way I approached all of that along the way, and why I was always so passionate about that when I was teaching students as well, that even if you didn't want to be a journalist, what I am sharing with you will improve your life. It'll show you how to think. It will allow you, it'll allow you to balance competing interests. It will allow you to think critically. All of those things that make you a better person in society. And my mum. So my mum was a stay-at-home mum. And so I've often thought, what strength did she pass on? But it was that constant belief that I could do anything. She was my number one fan. And to grow up knowing that she's passed now, But to know that she was always in my corner, that was really
Unconditional.
unconditional, always there. You know, Dad, being a typical Italian, might have been fiery or off the handle, so she'd be the one in the middle protecting us if we needed to be shielded. And I mean that in a way of, let's not tell Dad that you were home late today, or, let's not tell Dad
Let's not.
that you got 90 out of 100 instead of 99 out of 100 or whatever, that kind of shielding. She was always doing that. Then I did lose my father early. I was only in my early 20s when he died. And so then it was really Mum. She took on the role of Mum and Dad, and we became, really close for the next decades. And she was, a really important part in my life.
How do you think she would view now?
Now, she would have thought I was a bit crazy. She would have been really worried during the campaign because she would have worried that, I had put myself out there for criticism or for what happens with loss, And if you're going to stand for something like an election, you have to be prepared to lose because there were 6 of us running for mayor and only 1 was going to make it. So you have to be prepared for that. And that's what she would have been worried about. She'd be pretty proud now. She would definitely be proud now.
What inspired you initially to transition from a successful career in journalism to running for mayor?
So I had spent, 29 years at 7 News and 24 years at the University of the Sunshine Coast lecturing, again in journalism, always in that sphere. And I thought, if this was it, if this was what my career was, would I feel like I had done enough? And the answer that came back to me was no. And at the same time, I was listening to a podcast, and I listen to podcasts all the time, lots of different podcasts, and it was Julie Bishop. And Julie Bishop said she had had a career as a lawyer first, and that was 20 years. And then her next 20 years was in politics, and that she was starting now her third lot of 20 years being on the board, and she's the Chancellor at the National University. So lots of different aspects of her career. And I thought, well, I've spent more than 20 years at 7 and more than 20 years at the university. I just did them concurrently, luckily.
Sure, that counts.
So what's my next? Well, thanks for that. So what's my next? And then the idea of mayor dropped into my head, and then I couldn't unsee it.
Yeah.
So that idea of wanting to do more, wanting to be more involved in the community, and I had spent decades being really involved in the community. So I felt that had given me a great preparation, that then that was really the next step, and everything had led to this point. And for me, it all just seemed to align, that everything I had done had brought me to that point of putting myself forward to the people of the Sunshine Coast. And that is a scary place to be, putting yourself in front of the people.
Yeah, and I like to talk about that because as a journalist, you are presenting the story to a wide audience, but not sharing your opinion. You're just saying, this is it. They might not like you as a presenter, but they can't take issue with what you're saying because you're essentially saying the facts.
Fair, balanced, impartial.
Sure.
I'd spent 3 decades not having an opinion known.
Yeah.
Obviously, I had opinions.
Sure.
And they do say as a journalist, if you have both sides of an argument thinking you are on the other side, you've done well. So, if you are presenting that fairly. And the same, I spent a lot of years presenting the weather. A lot of people might not like the weather and you might not get it right, but you are using your resources and presenting that in a way forward. So, yes, that was one thing.
And then as soon as you decide to run, and in particular now you're in the role, it is a complete flip. Like people are judging you based on your opinion and voting for you or being a supporter of, or that support flips dependent on your stance or opinion on any given topic. How has that shift been for you?
So that's probably the hardest fundamental. And during the campaign, I guess, I was really out there listening. So my stance on this is what I think really isn't as important as what my community thinks. That's what I have to stand for. that's what I have to represent. That's what I have to advocate for. That's what I need to speak about. So in that sense, it's kind of amplifying what I've always done before.
Yeah.
So that's the approach that I've taken so far. And admittedly, I'm not very far in, right? So I've been out there still consulting community because that's where I think my style of leadership will be different.
How important is it as a mother of 2 daughters, of 3 kids, but also a woman in leadership? How important is it for you to show that and to fly that flag for the people in the Sunshine Coast, or the women in the Sunshine Coast?
It was really important. And, people came up to me and said, thank you for doing this for my daughter. So the fact that people came up and said that to me, because the campaign is brutal, putting yourself out there day after day, the number of events, I would go to 4 events a day. I have boundless energy and enthusiasm. So I would go to things from the morning and then all the way through to the evening and still be presenting at town hall type forums and all of that. I put myself out there. You take all of the criticism, whatever it is, whether that's personally or whether that's online. So it is really brutal. It's physically and emotionally taxing. And I did that, and people would say, thank you, because you are showing my daughters, the community's daughters, that we can do this, that there are avenues that as a strong woman you can put yourself forward and not only survive but thrive. So, that's something that's really important to me, to show my daughters but to show everyone's daughters, and to also encourage other women out there that if you're thinking for a moment, I don't know if I'm strong enough to do this, you are.
That's really, really powerful. How did that conversation go with the kids that mum's going to run for mayor?
If I'm really honest, it was mixed because, yes, that's exciting. They think that, the fact that I wanted to put myself forward, they were really supportive about that. But on the other side, that means I'm not going to be home cooking dinner, right? That means I'm not going to be quite as hands-on. Our place at the moment is a disaster zone. It feels like no one's folded laundry for 3 months. And it doesn't just feel like that. That is actually the way it is. No one's folded laundry. No one's put it away, because I'm like, well, you guys need to do that. And they're like, we don't do that kind of stuff. So probably I'd done a bit too much for them throughout their lives. And so I'm not home cooking dinner every night. I come home for dinner a lot of nights, but I'm not always there early cooking it. Laundry is struggling, but I'm finding my way. And that's where we're going to find a balance as well. And they're finding their way, because now they are also in a position where they are having a little bit more freedom, shall we say, as well, So my children are 22, nearly 20, and my baby, so Roman, got his license last month.
Wow.
So Roman got his license last month. So I'm finally not a taxi driver. It's taken
that's great
a
timing
long
though, right?
time. But that was also part of the thinking, I knew that he would turn 17 a month after the election, and that once he was able to get his license, that he would then be able to drive himself to and from school. So I'd be off the school drop-off. I've been doing the school drop-off for 18 years.
Yeah.
And apart from, the little break I had when each of the girls got their licenses and could drive, I've been doing that school drop-off and pickup. And so he's in year 12, and this is my final year as a school mum. And so that's a big change. But I also knew that was coming. When I was thinking about running for mayor and my family commitments, those ages are old enough for them.
Yeah, 10 years ago.
10 years ago,
harder.
no. 10 years ago would have been impossible. I would have needed to change completely the way I parent. Whereas now I can order takeaway or cooking services to help, whether we're going to do Marley Spoon or HelloFresh or Light and Easy or something else.
Yep.
I can order my groceries online. There are other ways that I can still be the parent I wish to be that wouldn't have been able to be, achievable if they were 10 years younger. So the timing was right. This is my time. When I looked at it, all of these things were aligning. So when I said before that it dropped into my head and everything seemed to be pointing to this direction, it was also things like that. My time, my family, it was the time that I could take this step. And I had worked part-time in both of those careers and juggled them so that I could do drop-off, pick-up, be at school, do all of those things when I needed to be there.
The cross-country champ,
the cross-country race, the drama performance, the recital, whatever it was that they were doing, that I could be there, and driving them to sport. Anyone who has kids who do a sport, if one child does more than one sport, or if you have more than one child and they're doing multiple sports, anyone who has lived that knows that you need to be so organised and your calendar needs to be so down to the detail so that you've got the right child in the right location with the right parent and the right clothing, because otherwise, all of that, anyone who's been there and lived that knows that that's really an intense time in your life, which is great and so much fun. But for me, that life was moving on and I was going to be found with a lot more time. So I thought, well, I will preempt my empty nest and I'll find myself something that really makes me passionate and lights my fire. So it was all about that. All of those things aligned and it was right for me.
Funny how you have such a phase of life and 2 decades of it or 3 decades of it almost to say, well, all of that with the family, with everything has all been set up to be right here and to achieve this goal that we're trying to achieve. And
I just got goosebumps as you said that, because that's how it feels. It feels like all of those things swirling around distill to this point.
Yeah. It's incredible. Can you share some of the biggest challenges you faced in the campaign? Because this is the very first taste personally of you being, the face on the billboard.
Yeah.
What were the challenges that maybe someone from the outside wouldn't necessarily see?
I guess the first things, what I found hurtful was when people wrote things like, she's just a weather girl, what would she know? Because to think that I had spent 30 years of a career, which included being an academic at university and being a published academic, to have that reduced to being a weather girl and just a weather girl, I think says much more about society. It says much more about the way women are viewed, the way the work that women do is viewed. And that made me really sad and angry to think that after all of this time that people were prepared to put all of the work that I had put into across 2 spheres, tertiary education and broadcast journalism, that they would put that and demean it in such a way, because weather girl is not a flattering term. They didn't say weather presenter. They didn't say, broadcaster. That I think was really difficult and also showed me perhaps that, where the community or society views women who stand up and put themselves forward.
Unlike news reporting where they're facts, there's going to be a discerning portion of the community that you represent that don't agree or that are impacted by a specific decision. How do you personally deal with the opposing opinions or the negative feedback? You're not going to appease everybody. How do you deal with that personally?
That is the difficult part, right? Because you can't please everybody. It's impossible. And for a people pleaser like me, that's hard, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the things I really reflect on is that social media has allowed everyone to have a voice, which is fantastic. People who may not have had a voice before now have an avenue. But it does also mean that people behind a keyboard can be far meaner and nastier than they have ever been before in society. And fake profiles, or where they don't have a face, or those sorts of issues that come up, and then they comment. I find that difficult to tolerate.
Yeah.
And I think anyone in our society would. If you can't put your name and your face to what you're saying, then I really question whether you should have a right to be out there and be critical. everyone has a right to an opinion. Everyone has a right to express it. But if you're going to be hurtful and mean, then I think you need to stand up and own it.
Own that.
Own
Yeah.
it. Because I'm an elected official. I'm in a public place. People can say whatever they like and feel whatever they like, and I can take that on board. And I'm happy to receive that. I'm happy to receive feedback because that's how I will get better. But you have to give that to me personally. You have to own it and say, I'm prepared to give you that feedback.
Yeah. Get me into this situation as well. Your husband is the councillor for a division on the Sunshine Coast as well, currently, or before the election. So he was going for re-election for that position. And then you say, honey, I want to run for mayor. This could potentially derail both of us if we're both running for different races, but essentially, the public could potentially see that as a conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not there either to support each other to a full degree as if only one of you are running. Is that all contemplated? Are you guys discussing that prior to nominating? Because I imagine you're both supporting each other for your own objective or your own outcome, but presumably you would be there far more in his corner but for the fact you're running for mayor, and he would be far more present in your corner but for him running his own councillor race.
Yes, and we had to also keep those campaigns separate because we weren't running as a team. So we kept the campaigning, we kept each other very separate during the campaign. That was clear.
Couldn't even be seen having dinner out in the public because it's like,
we were not together. No, we were not. He was running his campaign, I was running mine. But also when I talk about the timing being right, he had been the councillor for 4 years. So he had already built up a lot of contacts and a lot of public goodwill. He had dealt with a lot of projects. Some of them were controversial, some of them were not, but he had been able to build that so that he was able to go and do his campaigning without me, without the same support levels that he might have needed in the past. So he had his own volunteers come forward who were able to do that. If he was starting from scratch like I was starting from scratch, that would have been far more difficult, and I would have had to really think about what I was going to do, and he might have had to think about what he was going to do. But for him, it was a continuation. So he had his own.
He was okay.
Yeah, he
but
was okay.
But for you, going into a space where you're not in the public space, because he's in the public eye and has been for 4 years, you haven't been in the sense of voicing your own opinion and being subjected to that. Was there times where you were thinking, gosh, it would be nice to have Joe not run? Or
no, it never even entered my head.
You had that support?
Because it was always, he was there first, right? So my decision came into being on his gig. So I never actually thought about that. And I try not to think about things that I can't change or that I can't have an influence over and not waste time pondering about that. So that was gone. I had to look at what I needed to do and who I needed to surround myself with to make what I needed happen.
On that, your husband, Joe, he was the mayor of the Maroochy Shire Council back then. And then when the councils amalgamated, he ran for the Sunshine Coast position. You were on the campaign then for helping him, and then he didn't get it. You had the front row seat of what is essentially the highs and lows of politics. And yet you still put your hand up going, this is what I want.
Oh, I'm mad, right? I'm mad.
It's such a polarizing outcome or event, right? It's such a finite game, politics, certainly for the campaign, right? You either win or you don't. And as you say, there's for the 6 of you wanting the same thing. How did you prepare? And you said your mum would be worried about the loss if it came. Did you give much weight to that outcome as a possibility, or was it we'll just see and I'll pick up the pieces?
For me this time, I still had 2 careers who were both very happy to have me back. They were sorry to see me go, happy for me, but so I had 2 jobs I could go back to. So while I would have suffered personally that feeling of defeat, I at least had jobs to go back to, and being busy is always a great remedy to any kind of sadness. If you have to get up in the morning and you have to go to work and you have to face people and you have to be, and I am a very happy, positive disposition and I'm an optimist. So I would have taken that as this was not meant to be and I would have thrown myself into those careers again. So I had 2 jobs.
Yeah.
And then I may have looked at what else was going to be, but I had a fallback position. So in that sense, I was very lucky. Whereas in a future election, or as what happened to Joe, I wouldn't have that necessarily. So then I'd be thinking, what next? You can't put yourself out there and not be prepared to lose. You have to be aware at least.
Well, there has
You don't want to plan for it.
No. But, unlike the job at 7, you always want to improve and be the best presenter you can be or the best journalist you can be. But it's an infinite game. You just want to stay in the role. Whereas this is such a binary, like you either get up or you don't. And the potential for you not to get up was there. If you're not ready for that or if you haven't contemplated that, but it has to be there. To put your hand up, you've got to face the risk of it not turning out the way you wanted to.
And as you said, I had seen that firsthand a number of times. There had been a lot of campaigns that I had been very close to over my life. So I had seen that. So maybe that made me more ready.
Now you're in the role, which is the success of the objective, right? You're in that position. Where does teamwork and where does leadership come into play with trying to steer this ship the way that you'd like it to be steered?
I have 10 councillors and then I'm the mayor, and each of us have 1 vote. So when anything comes before council, each of us equally has a vote. So it really comes down to us all working and sharing our views, sharing the views of our communities individually when we are debating issues. And that's whether that's in the chamber or outside of the chamber where we are talking about different issues that are coming up. And the biggest one for us to date has been the budget, because we are bringing down a budget and that's a really difficult process. Everyone wants more for their division and everyone wants projects in their division. And we're balancing that with the cost of living crisis, with the cost of providing services skyrocketing. Everyone knows everything is costing more as well. Construction is costing more, services, all of that. So we're balancing trying to keep the costs down for our ratepayers in our community. We're trying to balance those skyrocketing costs. We're trying to balance, I want this in my division. My people have been waiting. We're trying to balance as well. I stood for that back to basics approach of getting the things like our roads and our rubbish and the mowing on the sides of the roads and our parks and the things that make a difference to everyone's day. I campaigned on that. So we're trying to have an influence on that in a budget process that normally takes a good 8 months, and we've had 2. Because of the way the election process is. The timing. What we'll be able to deliver this time will be a start in that direction, and then the next budgets going forward is where we'll really be able to have that impact.
What's been the most surprising element of the role, in the sense of what's been something that you weren't anticipating, despite the fact that Joe's had that experience and you've seen it?
How long everything takes. How many people have to be consulted about everything, how important governance is. So we are incredibly legislated. There is a state government legislation for everything, everything. And so you might think it's easy to say, can we do this? And yet all of these different people have to have an opinion and
sign off on it.
So it's not just opinion. We're actually consulting legislation. We're consulting then a policy. So there could be a council policy about it. There could be a legislative framework around it. There could be a strategy around it. All of those things need to be consulted before you can have any random whim that you might think is a good idea. So that's, I guess, been surprising. And also most people probably wouldn't know, but councillors or the mayor, we can't direct staff. So we can't tell a staff member to do something just because we want it done. That is part of the framework that surrounds us. That is illegal for us to do that.
Right.
So the only thing we can do is ask questions. We can ask information. We can ask those sorts of things, but you can't direct them. So we can set policy, we can set direction, we can do it that way through our meetings, but we can't actually go and say, an officer, go and do this,
that.
go and fill that pothole over there. We can't direct for that to happen. There's a whole set of priorities about all of that work and all of those things. So that comes under the CEO.
Yeah.
And so that's that process, that operational arm versus the strategic policy arm that the elected representatives are. And that's probably the hardest thing for community members to understand as well, because they'll say, I voted for you, now I want you to go and do this.
Yeah.
And that's not the way that can go.
Over the 3 decades of work that you've done and raising a family and all of those different decisions, owning businesses, you have to obviously come up with a sort of inbuilt way of making the hard decisions. And now in this role, I'd imagine your hard decisions are daily. Has that strategy changed? Do you just look internally as to what you feel is the right way forward in terms of your vote or your position?
Yeah, I try to listen to my gut. And also, if it feels light, it's right. So if something feels right, and not just, obviously, you have to weigh everything up and you have to read broadly and you have to listen widely, all of those things, but you get a real sense of what the right decision might be sometimes. And so far, that's been able to steer me the right way, what feels right.
Because I imagine there's a fair few people who are trying to give you information and asking you to rely on that information, and they have their own agendas as well.
Yes.
And so
understanding everybody's competing agendas, that's the bit that's hard so far.
Yeah.
Especially when I don't know who's who in the zoo yet. I have to think, okay, why are you telling me that?
Yeah.
And where is that coming from?
Yeah.
And really trying
How
to
reliable is that information?
And that's why as well for me going out to all of those different community events that I'm still going to, I'm going out to different residents associations or Chamber of Commerce or businesses or business people or, the Mulaney Show or wherever there are people, I'm going out because those people let you know the direction.
You get a feel for it.
And you get a feel for it. And that's also where if I have a problem that is weighing on me, I can go and chat to some people and go, what do you think about this? And it's really interesting because I think too, sometimes you can get so worried about a particular policy or a particular decision, and then you go outside and no one's looking at that. No one's thinking about that or worrying about that. Sometimes something that's really big and weighing on you needs to be put into perspective, and that broader perspective of what do the people who live here, what matters to them can help in that decision making. Not discount the decision by any means, but help you weigh it up and look at it differently. So when I have a decision, I try to look at all of the different people who have given me advice, and then I try to actually physically go outside to the sunshine and think, okay, look out here. What is really at the crux of this issue? And try and step outside. Because I think if you can step away from yourself, things can become clearer.
Yeah. Give it a little bit of perspective.
Yeah. Just give a little bit of distance between you and the decision in that moment. Sometimes it can be time. Sometimes it can be space. Sometimes it can be overnight. We all know that sometimes when you get up in the morning, that problem that you've been worrying about all night suddenly doesn't seem as large, and you're like, what have I been losing sleep over? This has been okay.
Yeah.
Or the same, sometimes the anticipation of a decision or an event is far worse than the decision itself.
Yep. Except that.
Yeah. Sometimes you worry so much about something that when it actually happens, it's not as bad. And that might be because you've already prepared for all of those, consequences or all of those alternative actions that might happen. I try and remember that too, but that's really hard when you're in it.
Yeah. Off air, you talked about, which I thought was so beautiful, about the fact that you're growing as a human so rapidly.
Every day.
Yeah. And then you look back at Rosanna last week and she's a shadow of the Rosanna that's this week.
I feel like every single day I am learning more and growing more. I have a Post-it note on my desk and it says, I'm expanding, because I feel like every day I am a bigger and better version of me than I was yesterday. So I'm a bigger and better mayor and a bigger and better person today than I was yesterday, let alone last week or last month. So that is just incredible to me. I didn't expect to have this feeling. I expected to learn a lot because I have a lot to learn. I expected to be pulled in different directions. I expected to have nights where I didn't sleep because I was worrying about things. I expected all of that, but I didn't expect this feeling of my own personal expansion.
What do you think that says about the human potential? Give the person the opportunity to grow and it'll fill the gap. Like the potential will fill it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like there is this space and I am rising to it. I am filling it. So that is extraordinary. Surely there's a book in that.
Well, yeah, I think that there is that they limit themselves to a particular, let's say a size jar, and they go, well, that's my potential. You put yourself in a bigger jar and you'll, as you say, you'll automatically
fill the jar.
That.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we try to be safe. A lot of times people want to be safe. And I've probably wanted to be safe a lot of my life until you take that risk. And you need to be in a position where you can take the risk as well.
Yeah.
Nobody can take a risk when you're sitting there and you have a job and you're feeding your family and you're paying all of those bills. Risk is not for that time. You have to find other ways to fill yourself and allow yourself to grow while still mitigating that risk. But if there is a chance where you can take a risk, then growth is the only outcome. If you're taking a risk some way or another, whether it goes well or whether it goes badly, that is going to be the outcome.
Yeah, you sit in the corner and not put yourself the opportunity to grow. You're just going to sit there. But you put yourself out there, there is some element of risk, whether it's small or large. You're going to be better off because of the experience.
Well, you're going to learn something eventually. Sometimes, and we've taken risks that haven't gone so well, and at the time you're like, why did I do that? And you want to rock in the corner. But ultimately you get up every day and you keep moving forward. And I have another saying that's, left foot, right foot, breathe. Left foot, right foot, breathe. Because sometimes just getting through the next few seconds, the next minute or two can just be so hard that if you just can focus down and bring it down to that little thing.
Yeah.
The other thing I do, I talked about how I go for a walk every morning. I really try and look at the colour of the light. So sunshine, the way it dances on some water, whether that's a puddle or a river, or the way a leaf flickers, or the way a cloud looks in the sky. And I try to, when things seem really overwhelming, and this can be a family issue, it can be a work issue, or it can be a broader community issue. They're all the sorts of things that I'm balancing and grappling with at any one time. I try to look back at nature and really be grounded and go, it's okay. Everything is going to be okay. Let's just get through this next minute or two and then work out where to go from there.
That's some great strategies. I find it almost near impossible for your role to win because everyone has their own agenda. But you've also got to see the whole picture that no one else is really seeing. While you have people who are keen on industry and the expansion of that, then also people keen on a higher level of density of living. But then there's also people wanting the coast to stay the same and as it always has been. But then there's growth is happening, and particularly with the Olympics coming in 8 years, then you throw in public transport issues and you throw in what are we going to do about the affordability of living and housing? And there's just there is a lot to sort of meander your way through to find out a place of, like, is utopia, like, it's almost an impossible task. We've already accepted that we can't please everybody. But how do you manage through that with your vision of what the Sunshine Coast looks like in the future?
So what you've just said and described is the impossible problem. And that's exactly where I'm sitting right now. Because not only do we have this growth, and when I talk to other people around the place, they're all like, it's a great problem to have because it drives our economy. So it will drive jobs and it will drive so many elements of our society and our economy in particular. And yet it's what the people who are here already don't want to see challenging our lifestyle. So that was the big thing about the people who are here now. Their needs, their lifestyle, what they love about the Sunshine Coast shouldn't be compromised for the people who are to come. The thing is, our growth rate has been fairly consistent. We've had a high growth rate for the past 20 years and more. But it's compounding, right? So the rate might be the same, but there's more people coming because we're off a larger base.
Yeah.
There's 365,000 people living here now, and by 2041 there'll be 500,000. So we'll be at 500,000 people in less than 20 years. And the thing is that is, by the state government, a requirement for us to deal with. So the South East Queensland Plan says this is how many people will be coming here. You decide where they're going to go, but this is how many people will be coming here. And there is always the danger that if we say no, that the state will say, okay, thanks very much, we'll take care of planning in your area because you won't. So that's a balance that we're always facing as well with that plan and with the state government, who are saying we have to build more houses and homes. So not always houses, but we need to build more homes for people because we cannot have people coming and not having a home to live in. And as a society, we don't want people not having a home to live in. That is a terrible situation. And we need to make choices that will allow more homes and more diversity of homes. And if we don't want to go outside our urban footprint, then that means increased density. And if you ask most people, neither of those options are what we want. We don't want to go into more of our environment because once that's gone, it's gone forever. So if you develop into further green spaces, they're gone forever. And there are spaces in our current town plan designated for development that are currently green, but we all know that they will be developed. For example, outside of those areas, the only other option is density. And again, we have grown up in Australia where the house and a big backyard was everybody's norm. And we are all still grappling with that. The fact that the backyards of our childhood are not the backyards of our grandchildren because Australia has changed and change is hard.
So then how do you, as a sitting mayor, you're appeasing your community with demands now or their desires now, and they're the ones that are here, but you've also got to have a fairly strong view on the future and where we're headed. But the future people aren't the ones that are voting you back in or the ones that didn't vote you in the first place. So how do you balance that?
And that's where it's an impossible problem, right? And as an elected politician, you have to stop thinking about the next election if you're going to make the best decisions, because you could just jump up and down and say what is a popular view, but leadership is hard. And that's, I'm only a few weeks into it and we are getting presentations on the town plan and looking at that because I haven't seen it. The town plan is currently off with the state government for state interest checks. So I'm now getting briefings and more information about that. And then we will take it out to our community and we will say, this is what the future could look like. It doesn't mean next year or in 5 years, because currently that kind of density or growth needs to be economic for any developer to take it on board. And with the cost at the moment of construction, none of that is happening. So it won't happen overnight. But this will be going out to community and saying, give us your feedback on what this plan is, because whatever you say, we can then go to the state government and say, this is what our community thinks. And ask the state government then to say, so let's go with what the community thinks.
Now you're in this position. What's the goal?
The goal is to deliver decisions and be a mayor the community is proud of. So I really stood for making change and being a change. Those small things that might start to ripple through. Change doesn't happen quickly. People have said, oh, it's a big organisation, how can you make change? And the first way is by being change, being the way that I expect people to behave, doing that myself internally.
Being the example.
Being the example. That by being honest, open, accountable, but not just accountable, accessible, putting myself out there, letting people know where I'll be, letting and inviting that feedback, as hard as it may be sometimes, that's an example of that. And then, that will flow through as long as we, and I mean that with my councillor colleagues and we will shape that future with all of the decisions going forward. So it's a really exciting time. The fact that there is growth coming means that we have the opportunity to shape. There are some communities in our state and in our country where it's the opposite, and they're facing dire situations, whereas, we know that we will have this continued growth. And we have to try to manage those growing pains, which is a totally different problem to have. And the other thing that's been really interesting, as I've gone to the Council of Mayors of South East Queensland and I sit around the table and there are, 11 mayors all saying the same thing, that we're all struggling under infrastructure, the lack of public transport, that we have this growth coming, that we're trying to manage it. There's some comfort in knowing as well that other communities are facing similar problems and that I can look there and see what solutions might have worked there or might not have worked there, because we don't want to be the same as them.
Sure.
But we want to learn from their lessons.
I love the idea that you're driven to be the mayor that the community can be proud of. I think that's a really, really beautiful target, or at least benchmark to put you on.
Yeah, I want people to say, there's our mayor.
Yeah.
And be happy to say it.
Yeah. Madam Mayor, this has been wonderful and I really appreciate your time. We've discussed how gracious I am for it. So before you go, 5 questions that we ask everyone. Number 1, how does success look for you?
So success for me looks like someone who gets up every day and feels proud of what they're going to try to achieve in a day. So that success is getting up, going out there, whatever that is, and launching yourself with passion. Lukewarm is no good. So let's go with being passionate and driven to achieve whatever that is for the day. And then at the end of the day, looking back and going, you know what? I got out of the house today.
Yeah.
Or I climbed 3 flights of stairs today. I climbed a mountain today. And whether those things are actual or figurative, you've done
the intention.
Yeah. And you've done that at the end of the day. That is success.
Love that. What does happiness mean to you?
So happiness is a feeling that you get when a few of the planets align. So it might be that it's not raining and you've done the washing and you can hang that out. It might be that a toddler is laughing. It might be that you see a duck on the water with the little ducklings behind. It's taking a moment out of your busyness to just notice something.
The small thing.
The small thing. It might be the hug one of your children gives you. It might be a smile that someone that you're close to gives you. That's happiness. It's a tiny instant. And if you can pay attention to that instant and nestle it away in your heart and collect them there, that's where happiness is.
Love that. A book that you would recommend?
It was interesting because as I was thinking about the books and I was thinking about novels or self-help or where I was and I was thinking about Atomic Habits, and then I walked into this room and it was on the bookshelf.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, maybe I'll just go with that one.
Fantastic.
Because it's hard. Picking a book,
Yeah.
That's a hard question.
Yeah. Atomic Habits from James Clear. It's great. Okay. Penultimately, 4 guests who you'd invite to dinner, not friends or family, but who could be dead or alive.
Okay. This is one I used with students as well.
Okay.
But I used to do who would you interview, dead or alive?
Oh, nice.
You know, so
Yeah. Similar thing.
Similar.
Yeah,
similar.
You're just sharing a meal.
Yeah, sharing a meal and chatting with them. So
Yeah.
first of all, it would be Princess Diana, because I grew up at a time when her whole life was before us and it was a fairy tale and then it wasn't a fairy tale, and I'd love to talk to her about that. I would like Barack Obama and Michelle, because both of them for different reasons, and just to tap into what they know. And like, you know, we talked about how every day you've grown or I've grown. Imagine how much they've grown in their time. That would be amazing to talk to that. And then just to keep it fun, because, you know, we need to have a party, Pink, because she's amazing.
Yeah.
And she's so strong and funny, and she could even sing for us maybe and talk to us about what she does. But that would be a good mix, I think.
I like it.
You think?
Yeah. That's the cool.
It would be a fun dinner party.
100%.
Yeah, for sure.
And then finally, I guess, do you think we should interview famous or not on the show?
Oh, this was really hard because I mentioned that I do listen to a lot of podcasts. And then I was thinking, do you have Paul Taylor, who's really interesting, or Mia Friedman, who, you know, in terms of a woman across Australia with great views. So I was thinking like that. And then I was thinking locally, do you have somebody who is just doing really great work on a really local level here on the Sunshine Coast? And I am an ambassador for the Cindy McKenzie breast cancer program, for example. And just recently, a friend of mine spoke at one of their events, and that's a woman who's been dealing with breast cancer. And so incredible strength that, you know, that woman, Claire Smith, has shown.
Okay.
And that would be an awesome listen for other people as well.
Claire.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's I've gone from high-level Australian down to a woman who lives here in our community and has had this extraordinary strength.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, thank you for your time, and thank you so much for coming on. It's been a real pleasure.
The pleasure has been mine. Such an honour to be asked to share some of my thoughts and dreams with you. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. That was another episode of the Success Times Happiness podcast. Next time you're talking politics, be sure to let the other person know all about this episode. Until next time, peace.